All right, everybody, welcome back. I'm Matt Pamonte. This is Wyatt Darby, bringing you our third round here at the NRG Championship. So we're wrapping up our last round of Pioneer for the day. So the way the pods kind of break down, there's 4 players in each pod. So there's going to be someone who's 2-0, and then there's 2 players that are 1-1, and there's a player that's 0-2. So obviously the 2-0 player is going to get 3 points for their pod. Somebody's going to come out 2-1 after this matchup that we're going to show you here. They're going to get 2 points. 1 match win. The loser of this match is going to get 1 point. And then, unfortunately, the one who got no wins is going to get 0 points.
Yeah, we're kind of having the battle for second place here in our pot of death, as we call it, featuring Sam Black was actually the player who was 0-2, Lewis Kaplan 2 already. And here we have, Simon Camero is going to be battling it out versus Matt Dow. Pretty interesting matchup here. Boros Knights versus Boros Feather, Boros Heroic. So these players actually already did battle once today. Looks like they're ready to go for the second time. So why don't we get down there and be able to start their match here?
Okay.
Oh, it looks like they're still doing a little bit of shuffling up,
Gotcha.
maybe a mulligan or two, and kind of an interesting matchup. I think that's I actually kind of like the heroic deck positioning here off the back of a couple different things. Reckless Rage against a deck full of small creatures, and also just 4 copies of Shock. Lots of cheap interaction available for Feather. Yeah,
and I think the matchup went that way in round 1. I was talking to the guys earlier when they got paired. They're like, oh, man, we get to play another sweet one. But so apparently they played a good matchup. Dow got the W 2-1 over Simon, kind of reflecting what you mentioned. Some of those cards are a little bit more powerful in this matchup. That's who I would favor. Again, you mentioned those cards are pretty tough. Dreadhorde Arcanist, essentially giving those cards flashback, is pretty brutal. So we'll see how it goes here. So we'll jump down there, wrapping up a quick mulligan. Looks like it looks pretty good. There's some Gideon Blackblades in this deck too. A couple there for Dow.
One thing about Dreadhorde Arcanist, not just the flashback, but it's a 1/3. If you look at the Knights deck, there's stuff like Dauntless Bodyguard, Fervent Champion, Kythian, Venerable Knight. Without any pump effect from Simon, well, his hand in those games not going to be great, but can be completely embarrassed by just the modest defensive body.
All right, so they're going to multi-6. Let's talk a little bit about Simon here. So Simon's been all over our championship series here. So he's got CT win. He won the first one of the year this year to punch his ticket to our championship. He is a free agent, which is an interesting occupation.
I'm not sure what exactly that means. I mean, it's... I think that a lot of Magic players who play a lot of Magic are pretty close to unemployed. Free agent's a pretty good way to say that, too.
Yeah.
But Simon's been absolutely crushing it this year. He hit 5 top 8s lifetime. Do those all actually come during this calendar year?
I think there's 3 this year, if I'm remembering correctly. Let's see. He's got a bunch. He's got 3 top 8s this year. That's right. Yep.
Yeah, and we can see a pretty solid record versus the field, 7-4 overall. And some fun facts about Simon. He... let's see, used to have a rat tail until his dad cut it off.
Wow.
And he was also the author of the Queens of Cyberspace, a young adult series under the pseudonym Clancy Teitelbaum.
Wow, nice.
Yeah,
nice.
That pseudonym will throw, I think, most people off the trail. I don't think I've ever met anyone with Clancy as the name. So yeah, why don't we let's take a look at Matt here too.
All right, so Matt is a big staple on our tournament series as well. He also has 3 top 8s this year, which is fairly impressive. Matt's 32. He's a scientist out of Arlington Heights. He was at large 7th place on our leaderboard there. He qualified. He's 7-7 against the field, which is 500, and that's pretty good, to be honest, against the field that's this good.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's one of those things where these players have been killing it all year, and it's no surprise to see Matt in this tournament. I'm actually more surprised that he wasn't one of our monthly winners before now, and we see he did also compete in the championship 2 previous years, 2016 and 17, and looks like our players are keeping 6 here. So why don't we get down to it? Matt's leading off, and no turn 1 play. No Soulscar Mage or favorite Hoplite to lead off the game here.
Yeah, looks like he's got a Shock in hand there. Matt, it's interesting. So he's playing this Boros Feather deck in Pioneer. He also played the Boros Feather deck while it was in Standard and top 8'd in June. So that he's got some chops kind of with this style of deck.
And here we see a pretty awesome start for Matt, having Shock for the turn 1 play, and the Dreadhorde Arcanist coming down on turn 2, threatening to kill any card Matt could play. And actually, looks like that's Clifftop Retreat. Is that the second land? Clifftop? That actually should be coming into play tapped this turn, off Inspiring Vantage.
Nice. Looks like they might have caught it. So Simon looks like he meant to play that Sacred Foundry, so they're going to resolve a quick judge call here and see what happens. So Simon he has a Sacred Foundry. Let's see what they want to do here.
Yeah, interesting. There's kind of been some updates to the, for lack of a better term, takesies backsies policy in Magic this year, and this seems like what could be a very clear use for it. No information's been gained from Simon's perspective. There is a correct land in hand to remedy this. So yeah, we'll just get this judge call resolved here as quickly as we can. And either way, the White Orchid is still going to be a pretty lackluster creature with that shock kind of face up in the graveyard.
Yep. All right, so let's see what we got going on here. So yeah, they're rewinding here. They're taking a random card in Matt's hand, putting it back on top of the deck, and then Simon's going to go actually for Dauntless Bodyguard here. Looks like they're going to keep that Clifftop Retreat as the land played. All right. And Matt going to go ahead and attack with his friends. The Dread Hurricane is going to flash back that shock and kill Dauntless Bodyguard. Yeah, Matt's got Simon really under the gun here.
Yeah, Matt with the Reckless Rage in hand and the ability to cast it twice, once targeting the Legionnaire and then the second time flashing it back, with dealing 2 damage to the Dreadhorde Arcanist, means he's got Simon covered for a long time. And this Boros Knights deck is definitely a kind of quantity over quality type deck. There's a lot of pump that depends on really maximizing your battlefield presence. And, one card that does fight well against a wave of spot removal is actually the history of Benalia we see Simon play here.
Yeah, and Simon... That's a big time all-star from Standard Pass. So for 3 mana, you get to put a couple Knights in play. So the way it works is the first time it's going to put a 2/2 Knight into play. Next here, Simon's going to, after he draws his card, he's going to put another Knight into play. And then the final time on his third turn where this is active, Knights you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. Really tough there for Simon. So, but Matt does have that Reckless Rage for the first Knight. And there's a Defiant Strike on that 10th District Legionnaire. He's got another Reckless Rage in hand, too. I think Matt's going to run away with this one pretty easily.
Yeah, this turn being able to flash back that Defiant Strike means, let's see, that's an attack for, it's not going to be 7 damage this turn with some extra card advantage coming out of it. And yeah, just 10th District Legionnaire, so powerful. It's a 2/2 haste for a white and a red. And whenever you cast a spell that targets the Legionnaire, you put a +1/+1 counter on it and scry 1. So yeah, just heroic. Kind of written out here and really, really excellent in this spot. Letting Matt filter for really whatever he needs. Land drops for a shortage for a little while, but 1 extra comes off the top, and we also see a favorite hoplite kind of further cementing his battlefield lead.
Yeah, I was just looking at Simon's list, and there's not like any removal in the main deck here. So what's on the field for Matt is just here to stay unless Simon's able to block, which against Reckless Rage and another one in hand, not going to a lot of blocking to be had here. So Simon going to go ahead and just kind of stack up the board a little bit more and hope that Matt doesn't have another removal spell, but he's going to be disappointed.
Yeah, he knows at least one creature is going to be shot down. He's doing a pretty admirable job of trying to create a battlefield. The Dauntless Bodyguard protecting Inspiring Veteran is solid, but yeah, Matt just has too many tools available in his top 10 or 12 cards just to mow down these creatures. And from Matt's side, it's really just a matter of maximizing by sequencing here. Do we want to cast Defiant Strike on the favorite hoplite, make another large creature, and miss out on a scry, maybe moving further all in on the Legionnaire is another option. And Matt's going to start off by going to combat and using Arcanist to flash back this Reckless Rage, it looks like.
Yeah, he's got tons of tools at his disposal here, and Simon's really pressed. He's already at 7, so he's got some blocking to do, that's for sure. All right, let's see. So this Reckless Rage is going to go after... Looks like the Inspiring Veteran, but...
Yeah, really heads-up sequencing by Matt. With another Reckless Rage in his hand, he's actually leading with the flashback Reckless Rage so he can respond to the Indestructible, firing off another removal spell and kind of circumventing that protection from the Bodyguard.
Yep, nicely done there by Matt. And Matt's going to pick up the W here in game number 1 over Simon Camero. So these guys familiar with each other, of course. Again, they've played each other on the series a bunch, and they played the first round here, so... Let's take a peek at the sideboards here. So Simon's going to be on the play for game number 2. So I'm going to take a peek at his sideboard here. He's got He's got a ton of one-ofs here, and he's got an Embereth Shieldbreaker, an additional Knight of the White Orchid, a Spirit of the Labyrinth, a Pithing Needle, 2 Deafening Silence, 2 Rest in Peace, 2 Gideon Ally of Zendikar, 3 Boros Charm, and 2 Declaration Stone. There's a lot to like here, honestly.
Yeah, the Declaration in Stone kind of stands out to me. Just with the Heroic deck, they tend to have a small number of high impact creatures. So being able to tag that in a way that dodges the protection of Sheltering Light, only exposable to God's Willing, is pretty appealing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, maybe Simon slows down, tries something like Gideon Ally of Zendikar to make himself a little bit more insulated from the strength of 1-for-1 removal.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. I just, man, it's really tough. I do like the Boros Charms, their flexibility, I think. Being able to hit Matt for 4 sometimes. Also, maybe give your creature indestructible is kind of a decent flex slot. Deck and Stone is so weird to me. I feel like it could be good, and he needs the removal in order to get rid of these Arcanists and things like that. So
Yeah, and one thing that Simon could do is just hope to kind of have a sequence where Brave the Elements lines up a little bit better against
yeah,
the interaction
sure.
from Matt. But I think that he's going to have a pretty big natural advantage being on the play.
Okay,
His deck is very low to the ground, so it's possible he'll sideboard a little bit more minimally this game
sure.
and maybe try and shift into a slower role for the third game if there is one. And we can take a look at Matt's sideboard now. 2 copies of Aven Mind Sensor, an additional Gideon Blackblade, 3 copies of Gideon Ally of Zendikar, 2 Healing Grace, 2 Valorous Stance, 2 Griff's Boon, as well as a Pithing Needle, and 2 Rest in Peace.
Okay.
So Healing Grace is a card that we saw a little bit in standard Boros Feather. Excellent against any red-based aggressive deck, and
Yeah.
I actually think that it looks kind of reasonable here, actually.
Yeah, it's not too bad. It's pretty good. I think that's an interesting one. We mentioned that we thought Simon's deck might go a little bit bigger. Matt's deck could go bigger too. He's got more Gideons to bring in and things like that. And he looks like he plays a control deck a lot better than Simon can, with the shocks, those reckless rages, and all those types of things in his deck.
Yeah, I think from Matt's perspective, the card that really stands out that I don't want in my deck for this next game is the 2 copies of Gideon Blackblade from
Yeah.
his main. It's just a difficult card to protect in normal circumstances, but being on the draw against a 12/1 drop aggro deck, it's gonna be hard to leverage Gideon, and that is a pretty clean swap for the Healing Graces. So that actually just might be the extent of Matt's sideboarding for this game.
Yeah, that's fair. I think that one played out kind of the way you and I thought it would be. Matt would play a creature, kind of suited up with, you know, the spells like Reckless Rage and just kind of blow Simon's board out one by one, and then Dread Harkness was kind of help him play the control deck until he could finally kill Simon. So I expect Simon's deck to be a little bit better post board. He gets some decent pickups in like those Boros Charms, maybe Deck and Stones, things like that. We'll kind of see where they go here. I had wondered if it's probably way too slow. If Simon would think about something like Rest in Peace, which is very dead unless it's against exactly Dreadhorde Arcanist, but that card flashing things back is just a complete killer. All right, so it looks like they're ready to roll almost here. Simon is going to take a mulligan to 6, and Matt is keeping 7. So jump down there as Simon does a little bit of shuffling. Again, these players, even if you're new to this format here, even if you're 0-2 like Sandblack is in this pod, not out of it yet. We're going to be able to play 2 more formats. We're playing Legacy and Modern today at some point. The next round we'll reveal what the format is, and you're able to, maybe Sam wins the next 2 pods, and then he punches his way into the top 8.
Yeah, we've been kind of running some simulations, and getting 5 or 6 points across all of your pods tends to be kind of close to the mark of what a top 8 means. So that actually gives you some room to have an 0-2 and recover. And Sam has some pretty powerful, interesting brews in the other 2 formats for today. So being just such a strong player, I think he definitely still has a lot of time to kind of right the ship and make the top 8.
Yeah, definitely. So you see Simon's mulligan here. He's going to go ahead and put that down. He's going to lead on Sacred Foundry and pass.
Yeah, not the start that you want to see from Simon's perspective. Starting the beatdown on turn 2 is substantially slower, but actually Worthy Knight at the top is a great pickup, although meets a pretty quick shock. Let's see if Matt can kind of complete the perfect 2 turns by leading a strong creature out as a follow-up here.
Looks like he's got, that Dreadhorde Arcanist again. That's a good one.
Oh, and a feather in hand too. It looks like the
Yeah.
only thing Matt's missing is kind of just good spells to trigger with. Sheltering Light is capable of scrying, turn after turn in conjunction with feather, but that's only a minimal advantage. You'd like something a little bit more snowbally. Obviously, Reckless Rage is going to be the ideal in such a creature-based matchup, but yeah, a Defiant Strike, a God's Willing to make sure that you can kind of block effectively for lots of good things that Matt could find off the top here.
Yeah, and it looks like Simon just got a couple Worthy Knights in hand, I think is what's going on here. Looks like he's in some trouble here.
Yeah, and I do believe there's a copy of Brave the Elements for Simon, but
Yeah.
the kind of problem is all of his most powerful cards aren't capable of being cast with Brave the Elements protection up. So Simon's
Right.
actually kind of pivoting, just saying, you don't have that much pressure on me right now. Maybe I can just try and wait this out and kind of set up my powerful creatures with some interaction. And unfortunately, because of the Feather Hammer coming down this turn, it's going to be difficult to set that up. And we here actually see a shock on Feather to return that to hand. That's actually going to give multiple extra shock opportunities.
Yeah. All right. Dauntless Bodyguard and Worthy Knight are the plays here for Simon. You see Feather there. Feather the Redeemed is a 3/4. This is really tough for Simon to deal with. So for 3 mana, it's flying. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a creature you control, exile that card instead of putting it into your graveyard as it resolves. If you do, return it to your hand at the beginning of the next end step. So works really well with all of the instants that Matt has.
Oh, and here we see a pretty cool interaction. Soulscar Mage converting burn damage to creatures into counters means that it's not actually going to save. The Dauntless Bodyguard can't save Worthy Knight from this. So
Yep.
Simon does kind of snap off the protection and ends up kind of getting punished by a niche interaction.
Yep.
But definitely heads up sequencing by Matt to make sure that was a possibility. And now Simon's just in a world of hurt. Looks like that was a Defiant Strike as a pickup for Matt, so he now has that card advantage engine going with Feather, and he is really pulling away with this one.
Yeah, he's going to be able to bring that card back. He's got another Defiant Strike in hand. Yeah, and this is going to shock, or that's going to shock Feather again. Yep, sure is. Pretty safe play there because Simon has, no mana available, so Matt going to go ahead and shock his own Feather and bring that back to his hand, and he's just way ahead here.
Yeah, so let's take a look at Soulscar Mage. Kind of an all-star from last summer's standard. It featured pretty heavily in the Red-Black Chain Ruler lists. It is a 1-mana, 1/2 with prowess. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to a creature an opponent controls, put that many -1/-1 counters on that creature instead. So we actually saw the flexibility of Soulscar. Matt shocking his own Feather came at no downside at all. He was able to pick that shock back up and leverage it again this next turn.
All right, so let's see. Matt going to take one with that Battlefield Forge there. And going to shock down the token from Simon. And yeah, Matt is... I think the life totals might be frozen on our end, but we'll get those updated to you as soon as possible. So I think Matt's pretty close to crossing the finish line here.
Yeah, kind of. I think it might be garbage time territory.
Yeah.
Matt has the ability to cast 4 Defiant Strikes per full turn cycle, mixing in shocks whenever he needs to. But when the opposing board is all of a 1/1 Thales Lieutenant, you can kind of, just focus on getting the card advantage, stacking there's extra creatures in reserve if Simon is somehow able to pull multiple removal spells out of a hat. And yeah, Feather is just going off. And this is what we saw a lot in Standard against creature decks. Feather, Reckless Rage, Shock is just such a powerful core.
Yeah, he's... Flying is certainly good here, too. And I mean, Matt just has it all. He's got it all. He's got shocks. 2 of them, actually. And then he's got the 1 hanging out in the graveyard. He's in big trouble here for Simon. The shock's going to come back. Matt's just kind of figuring out where he wants to shoot it. Shoots his own Feather. That's an aggressive play.
Yeah, just might as well have the option to cast shock. It's something else later. If the board's looking pretty not particularly shockable right now, it's just it's a strong play. No other cards are going to be able to go to the graveyard with Feather, bouncing everything back to hand. So really maximizing all of his edges, and you can tell Matt has played a lot of matches with this particular list or just this archetype in general.
Yeah. So Matt is 5, 6. Yeah, and he's got him dead with that shock. So Matt going to win the matchup here over Simon Cameron. Go to 2-1 in the pod, so he's going to get a couple points, which is a good start. If you 2-1 all three of your pods, you're looking pretty good to make it into tomorrow's elimination rounds.
Yeah, Matt's got to be very happy with that. Being in probably the strongest first pod of the tournament and to get those 2 wins is an excellent start. And it's one of those things where, especially if, not sure, I haven't had a chance to talk to Matt before this tournament, but, players are pretty naturally feeling a little bit less confident about Pioneer because of the recent bans that just happened last Monday. A lot of players kind of had to trust their gut when picking their deck and didn't get exactly the practice reps in that they may have wanted. So, yeah, strong start for Matt, and we'll see if he can carry that into the next 2 formats for today.
Yeah, let's see. I want to see if I can bring up. So let's talk about the Pioneer archetypes, just you and I for a second here. So we got a couple minutes here. We're going to try and get a backup feature match on the tables for you. I know that one was kind of quick. So if you take a peek here. Now, was there anything really strange that you saw from the archetypes?
Yeah, I think the weirdest thing about our Pioneer field is I think we had 2, maybe 3 decks out of 24 that featured lots of copies, the full 8 Llanowar Elf Elvish Mystic package.
Okay.
And that's what I consider one of the big pillars of Pioneer. It's kind of one of the most powerful things you can do. And even post Oko, we have lots of great 3 drops.
Sure.
Jadelight Ranger, Steel Leap Champion, Ronus. I mean, Goblin Rabble Master.
Yep.
I could go on for a while. And to not see many players leverage that is really interesting. Also, I think we had 3 players register Thoughtseize, which is another one of the best cards in the format, and noticeably absent.
Yeah, I was walking around the tables last round actually, and there's a lot of these dredge decks too, which I think is pretty powerful. The funny thing is there's a lot of dredge decks and there's a lot of blue-white control. So there's tons of Rest in Peace to kind of combat that strategy. It looked really powerful though when I was watching. I was like, wow, this is pretty good actually.
Yeah, my experience against Pioneer Dredge is my opponent casts Stitcher Supplier. They mill Narcomoeba, Prized Amalgam, and Driven to Despair, and the game's over. It does have that explosive potential.
Yeah.
It's pretty resilient. It doesn't quite have the inevitability burnout plan that the Modern Dredge does with Conflagrate, but you still have Creeping Chill. You do still have Prized Amalgam. I think the deck's pretty reasonable. There's not a ton of graveyard hate in the format, so if it's going to succeed, the moment's probably now. And I'm not sure if the fail rate is too high, but it's had a strong showing so far.
Yeah, it definitely looked pretty good. Some of the other things that we saw here as I bring up the archetypes again, the Lotus Field combo you guys just watched on camera, that's an interesting deck to bring to something like this, especially against blue-white control. That seems fairly interesting. There's like one of the blue-red Emerge decks. We watched the Niv Mizzet. I watched that Grixis Pyromancer deck too, that Force Winstead brought. I think he actually might have 2-0'd his pod also. I'm not 100% sure. But he had a Dreadhorde Arcanist out, and you mentioned the Royal Scions with it. And there was like a Culligan's Command flashback. There was some like real heavy duty stuff going on. I was like, wow, this is awesome.
Good. I think Royal Scions is kind of lost in a year of really messed up Magic cards.
Yeah.
But that Grixis Arcanist kind of, like a lower to the ground mid-range deck is something that I've messed around a little bit with. Kind of sad to see Forrest not play Thief of Sanity in his particular version, but it's one of the it is one of the few decks in the field that did have Thoughtseize in it, and combined Arcanist with Thoughtseize, Fatal Push, and Opt to give himself a really flexible package of things to play. Even without Royal Scions making the Arcanist completely unbelievable, flashing back every spell in his deck. So an interesting thing about Forest is we did have, after our pods reset, one player was swapped. Our MVP, Joe Bernal, was able to swap a player into his pod. He actually picked Forest.
Yeah.
Kind of a monkey's paw type wish there. Forest just kind of dominated this first part of the day.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that swap there, because Joe's deck, he's playing the mono green deck, and I think it's pretty bad against the Arcanist deck. So putting him in your pod right away and taking in a bad matchup seems fairly interesting. I watched Forrest play against Darren Shahinian, and what was Darren playing at the time? He had a bunch of creatures out. Well, he didn't have a bunch of creatures out. He was playing Bant Spirits, and they were all just getting murdered. Just everything was dying, and I was like, well, this is pretty good here.
He had a lot of creatures for a very little amount of time, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly the matchup you want to play against with your removal heavy mid-range deck. Just show me lots of 1/1s for one, and not very many ways to protect them. So one thing about Pioneer Spirits is you don't have any Drug Skull captains. You can't make 2 copies of that and invalidate opposing removal. So you're playing a much more kind of fair, collected company game. I've seen what is it, even like Nebelgast
Oh
Herald.
yeah,
The
yeah,
spirits are a little bit weaker in Pioneer, like most decks are. So,
yeah.
yeah, if the kind of flash tap your creatures flying matters game plan doesn't do it, spirits can kind of fall flat.
Yeah, I know Sam went 0-2 with his deck, but it was super interesting. You'll be able to check out all the deck lists at nerdedgegaming.com if you haven't already moseyed over there during this little bit of downtime as we try and find a backup feature match. But there's tons of really great stuff going on. How many archetypes? There's tons of different archetypes. I mean, our field, as far as the three formats are concerned, was mega diverse.
Yeah, it's so we're gonna have to apologize. We are gonna have a format today with only 16 unique archetypes. So we actually started the day with a blue-white control mirror, and I actually think there's a reasonable chance that's the only mirror we have all weekend.
Yeah,
So,
I really think so. It was crazy to watch, and I'm like, wow, there's just not a ton of stuff going on all together that where people, even people were working together too. It wasn't like it was just 24 people working individually. There was tons of different people working together, but they all came to different conclusions, which I think means all the formats are relatively healthy.
yeah, I think that there are good decks in most formats, but there are ways to attack them. We saw that at the Players Championship last weekend in
Yeah,
Modern. Urza is, in my opinion, the best deck in the format, but there are ways to attack it. Last week was Devoted Devastation.
yeah,
This week we actually see a couple players playing a similar deck, Infect to fight it.
yeah,
So, yeah, I appreciate the players' kind of desire and ability to innovate.
yeah,
Because yeah, there's so many powerful tools in all these formats. It's nice to see kind of churn at the top of the metagame and not just, oh, this is the best deck and it's going to stay that way until something
yeah.
gets banned.
Definitely. All right. Well, it looks like we do not have a backup match here, so we're going to take a quick lunch break here. We're going to run some videos for you. We'll talk about 2019 in review and looking forward to 2020. So if you haven't seen any of our 2020 announcements, you want to hang on and watch this one. There's more prize money coming. Everybody likes money. There's more tournaments, all kinds of stuff coming up. And then we'll get into our second format, which will be revealed here shortly. And we'll do a metagame analysis on that one. And we'll be back in just a few minutes with some actual Magic for you guys.